When starting a YouTube channel, one of the hardest things is creating a channel identity. What is it that I can talk about which will attract an audience? This is especially the case when the channel is educational. It's worth thinking, what authority do I have in the subject that I want to talk about? Why is the information I give worth listening to? I guess I have a responsibility that the information I am giving is accurate, and am I willing to be responsible for the information I'm putting out there? So there were three questions there, and they're probably all linked. If I have authority on one subject, it is likely that I can be responsible for giving accurate information, and specialising in this subject would help build a channel identity. So what do I have authority on? Well, one thing that I am the world's expert in is my own experience of living with chronic fatigue syndrome. This is a chronic illness that I've been living with for nearly 2 years. As the title suggests, this is an illness where you feel extreme levels of fatigue all the time regardless of how rested you are. So this manifests itself in all sorts of ways, but the main symptoms for me is extreme tiredness, headaches and other flu-like symptoms. So I can confidently say that I have authority on my own experience of being ill. So perhaps my channel's identity can be based around my experience of this illness. Perhaps my aim should be to describe the experience, hoping that this could help other people going through something similar. However, I don't think my experience of chronic fatigue can be separated from my interest in philosophy. Philosophy is a passion of mine, and I became ill in my second year of my undergraduate degree while studying philosophy and politics. The reason I don't think the two can be separated is because living with chronic fatigue has been such a life-changing experience. After becoming ill, it was not possible to live the way I had done before because my body was just physically not capable of it. And when you live through a life-changing experience, it's very difficult to not become philosophical in some way. When life isn't going well, it's difficult not to question the meaning of it, especially when the issue is chronic, meaning it will either last for a substantial amount of time or for life. I know personally that I started thinking about my own identity and happiness. I questioned whether I was still the same person if I could no longer live how I used to. Would I be able to find the same levels of fulfillment and happiness if I'm always feeling unwell? So, because I was philosophically minded anyway, I feel my experience of chronic fatigue cannot be separated from a kind of philosophical journey that I went on. It can't be separated from the questions I was asking myself about my changed position in the world. Now, the problem with this is, unlike my experience of chronic fatigue, I do not have the sort of knowledge about philosophy where I can say I have authority to teach other people. I am still very much a student myself, and although I know some aspects of philosophy in depth, there is still so much that I don't know. So, how can I justify the fact that by posting videos online that focus on philosophy, I'm engaging in the role of an educator? I'm giving myself a role of authority and power in an area that I admit I don't have expertise in. Well, being honest is probably the most important thing. Being honest about what I do and don't know. My aim is that when I talk about philosophy, I make it clear that I'm trying to articulate my current understanding of philosophical issues, rather than claiming that I am in some way a definitive or objective source of analysis. I once watched a lecture by Alan Watts where he discussed the relationship between student and teacher. He said a teacher does have power over the student, but in order for the relationship to work correctly, the power must be given to the teacher by the student. Let's think of it like this. In order for the student to be open to being taught by the teacher, they have to admit to themselves that there is something that they lack. This might be a character trait like confidence, it might be a form of knowledge like the capital of Peru, or it might be some physical thing like the ability to score a good free kick in football. This is essentially an acknowledgement on their part that there is something that is worth them being taught. The student acknowledges that they could be something more than they currently are, and therefore voluntarily sacrifice some of their autonomy in order to transcend this version of themselves. The teacher then represents an embodiment of the thing that they value and desire, so the relationship between the teacher and student is one of transcendence. The flawed individual must admit their flaws and voluntarily accept that they could be better in some aspect of their life, and the power that the teacher has comes from the student's acceptance of this. My hope is that by being honest about my lack of expertise in philosophy, I am also admitting that there is something I lack, and this works in some way to dissolve the self-appointed power I have given myself by posing as an educator. And perhaps, if we are both students who admit that they could be better than they currently are, we can both transcend these flawed versions of ourselves. But where does this leave my channel's identity? I guess all of this has been a long-winded way of saying that this channel will discuss my experience of chronic fatigue, but with regard to the philosophical journey that it started. This channel therefore aims to try create something positive out of an otherwise bleak situation. By treating my chronic fatigue as the starting point of my philosophical journey, I am acknowledging that something that has been a massive burden and cause of suffering in my life is also a necessary condition for my recovery. How very Nietzschean. This channel therefore aims for another identity change, just like the one I faced when I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue. I am aiming to transcend the flawed person I am today, not to become the person I was before, but to grow into something even greater. And by doing this, I'm accepting my illness was a necessary part of this journey. So join me, the chronically fatigued chronic fatty, and let's see if we can both transcend together. Thanks.